two kinds of grace, common grace and special grace. This is part of a longer message, God's Common Grace, by Paul Bucknell, produced by Biblical Foundations for Freedom, www.foundationsforfreedom.net, releasing God's truth to a new generation.
What we call common grace. This is what our message is about today, unrecognized grace. It's perhaps so common we just assume it and we don't take it. But notice that all things, A, B, C, are true. God, the Son, it rises upon everybody, and He brings that favor into our life, so rain can come down, plants can grow, we can drink, animals can grow, everything works out. And it's delivered to everybody, right to your doorstep every day. The sun shines right in, and it's just so amazing. In fact, some houses, when you build your house, you build it in such a way you can get the wind, you can get the sun, right? That's what they do. Because it's so guaranteed. So guaranteed. There is another kind of grace here, and this is God's special grace. And we'll, I'm sure, speak about that a little bit more. But it's noted for special grace in that it brings a certain kind of favor to a targeted group of recipients. Common grace delivered to everyone, everywhere. A special grace to some people, some places. All right? Specialized. And so let me just give you an example of this, specialized grace. I'm not going to talk much about it because I want to talk about the common grace that's exercised to everywhere. This is just, I was reading from the Word of God yesterday from Jeremiah 33, 14 to 15. He said, "Behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will fulfill the good word which I have spoken concerning the house of Israel and the house of Judah. In those days and at that time, I will bring a righteous branch to David to spring forth, and he shall execute justice and righteousness on the earth." Now this is God's special grace. Now I want to remind you of the context here because it's very important. This is at a time when Israel was about to be judged, sent away to another nation, be taken captive. Many of their people would be killed. But 70 years later he says, I'm going to bring you guys back. Later on, I'm going to bring something into your life, the branch of David, referring to the Messiah, Jesus Christ. I'm going to do this, you see. This is special grace. Did he say that he'd do it? He didn't even do that with Samaria in the north. He did it with the house of Judah. Special grace targeted to a select group of people. But it's grace, nevertheless. You see, this grace is noted, both common grace and special grace, as always undeserving. So much misunderstanding comes about because we don't realize that. We always say that our rights of water, of sun, or clean air, that's the way we're thinking today, mentality, right? We deserve clean air. We deserve fresh water. I deserve it, and I'm going to fight if you don't give it to me. And we totally exclude who from the whole issue? God, right? But let's step back and think, no, that's not the whole picture. The whole picture is that all these things like the sun, the rain, are things that are grace, favor. God has specially put into our lives to bring into our lives. To bless us, to help us, to get by in our lives, to bring us closer to Him. And this is true with God's common grace and God's special grace. Now, if God decided to say, sorry, no more sun tomorrow, does He have a right to do that? Why? Just because it's a favor. Do we deserve it? No. Is it because we're good people? No. Is it because we're wicked people? No. It's because God said, I'll do it. And it's a benefit that He bestows upon us. Same thing with God's work and His grace. When He extends Himself to work in our life in a special way by giving us spiritual gifts. Yeah, that's what I'm like. No, not at all. It's a favor that God bestows on us. And He says, actually, if you don't use it to glorify Him, He'll just take it away. always undeserving, and so many misunderstandings come up because we think, God, you ought to do this, you ought to do that. Instead, we should humble ourselves. I am very greatly disturbed that our country has not humbled itself, such with the oil spill. Have you ever heard one thing about God or prayer meetings? No. We want to blame either BP or the government. Now, I know they're purposely making a dialectic and making that opposition and pushing their ways through. But I don't care, because God stands above all these issues. And when we begin to stand back as God's people, we begin to see how God works through all these matters. This is what's so important. So let's think a little bit more. He brings it upon the righteous and the unrighteous. And I just want you to bring through, hopefully, what I think is logical. Maybe to you it's not logical, but to me it's logical. Okay, Jesus does mention the evil and the unrighteous. So it seems like this is a common grace to us, right, that God ought to bring into our lives. This is what God's done, and He treats us the same. But we don't feel comfortable with that. Our first glance is say, yeah, that's right. But there's a problem, because why is God treating the righteous and the unrighteous the same? Isn't there something wrong here? Would you say so? You don't say so. Okay. That's good, because that's what He's not saying. But at the first glance, we're responding back. And we're saying, whoa, hold it, let's step back. But, there's a problem here, because when you think God's people, or the righteous people, let's call them just righteous or good, people deserve more from God, they don't get it, right? No. They're getting the same favor from God as the wicked next to Him. So I can go out and be the worst person, abusing people, smashing people's face in, and I can be that nice, kind person, giving away my last penny to someone in need, and God's going to treat us all the same. You happy with a God like that? Yeah, there's that wrestling within, isn't there? And there should be, because this is what Jesus is trying to get deeper with into our own lives, bringing that sense of commitment. But the most significant thing is that nobody deserves any of this kind treatment. It is a favor that's bestowed upon us, because we as people have gone astray. From the very beginning, when God made that garden, there was only one command that Adam and Eve were to do. And they didn't do that, and God kicked them out of that garden. Now, He had a whole redemptive plan there in store, and we won't get into that. But the point is that if we talk about favor, and that someone does something nice and we want to reward them, we understand that. But the fact is, none of us have done what God really wanted. We're all those sheep that have gone astray. As it says in Romans 3, we have all sinned and perished. Each of us go our own way, insisting our ways is best. And we still insist somehow that God should treat us so nicely.
This concludes Two Kinds of Grace, an excerpt from a longer sermon on common grace, part of the series Grace So Glorious by Paul Bucknell, produced by Biblical Foundations for Freedom, www.foundationsforfreedom.net, releasing God's truth to a new generation.